Hello friends, my name is JJ, and today I thought we would do a part 4 of my award-winning series on unique Canadian objects. You see, Canadians tend to be desperate to be different from Americans, and thus we have a tendency to cling to every tiny scrap of non-Americanness we can find, like a beaver on a sapling. And that includes making a big deal out of these small objects of daily life that we have, but the Americans don't. As you can tell, I am not the world's biggest fan of this particular method of building Canadian identity. I personally think that the many ways that Americans and Canadians are culturally alike are more interesting and meaningful, but it cannot be denied that this quest for uniqueness is something that Canadians think a lot about, and it fosters an interesting subculture within our larger continental identity. I have made 3 videos so far, documenting a total of 15 different objects that Canadians like to sentimentalize as symbols of our uniqueness, including footballs with an unbroken white stripe around the ends, colorful stripe blankets, and red rectangular mailboxes. And today we are going to add 5 more to the canon, beginning with these things. But first, a quick word from today's video sponsor, Saily. So the other day, I had a friend visiting me from the good old USA, and while we were running around doing fun Vancouver stuff, he wasn't able to use his phone because his coverage plan didn't include any foreign data. So whenever he wanted to look something up or text someone, he could only do it when he had access to my apartment's Wi-Fi. And I think we can all agree that that is no way to live. What he should have done is bought a plan from today's video sponsor, Saily. Saily is an app for your phone that can give you instant access to affordable data plans in over 200 different countries. And it does this by making use of your phone's little-known eSIM feature. After you download the Saily app, your phone's eSIM functionality allows you to buy coverage directly through the app itself, so no need to get any sort of physical card or even contact your cell phone provider. Saily plans are all very reasonable, and with my help, they're even more reasonabler. If you use promo code JJMCC at checkout, you can save an additional 15%. Wow. Just search for Saily in the App Store or click on the link in the description. So don't get caught flat-footed on your next trip to Vancouver, or I guess in theory some other place. Give Saily a try today and get sailin' to some savings. All right, so the first thing we are going to talk about are these exercise books. Do Americans even use that term, exercise books? Like a book for taking notes in school? A notebook, if you will? I discussed these things a bit in a video I made a while ago about nostalgic middle-class objects of the world. I've only recently become aware of just how sentimentalized these things are for Canadian school children, especially kids who grew up in the 80s and 90s, like I did. School is obviously the thing that so much of our child lives revolve around, which makes school supplies a natural trigger of childhood nostalgia. In the years before Canada had free trade with the US, it used to be a lot more common to encounter weird Canadian brands for all sorts of things. And I feel like school supplies is an area where memories of these brands are still quite actively nursed, probably because of that childhood connection. Anyway, these notebooks, which are just these floppy paper things, are like the leading symbol of this sort of school supplies patriotism. It probably helps that they have a big picture of Canada on them. They were originally made by the Hilroy Corporation that was founded in 1918 and then bought by an American firm in 1994. The new owners still sell these nostalgic style books to this day, but they are a lot less common than they used to be. I assume because today's Canadian families can afford to buy a much higher quality brand of notebook than these things, which are basically just a few sheets of paper stapled together. Okay. So I don't know if this is an urban legend or not, but something that I heard a lot when I was growing up was that over in Quebec, where anti-Canadian separatism was running hot at the time, the Hilroy Company put out special notebooks that replaced the picture of Canada with a picture of Quebec, so no one over there would get offended. I haven't been able to find any hard proof of that, But on the Staples website, they do sell these map-free notebooks that just say Quebec, and then it has the text all in French. And speaking of French, let us now check out this thing. It's a little blue sign with a little guy, and it says English, Francais. Now, despite my wishes, Canada is an officially bilingual country, with French and English recognized as the two official languages of Canada by the Canadian Constitution. Having one or more official language is a pretty common thing for a lot of countries, but Canada is quite unique in how much space our Constitution gives to the concept of language rights, or the idea that the government is obligated to make life easy for Canadians who speak English or French. Since the vast majority of Canadians are fluent in English, English-speaking Canadians don't have to make use of their constitutionally protected language rights very often. French speakers, however, are another story. Most French-speaking Canadians live in Quebec, and the vast majority of Canadians outside of Quebec cannot speak French at all. And yet, French-speaking Canadians legally have a constitutional right to access public services in French, not just in Quebec, but all across Canada. Now, what exactly counts as a public service is a complicated issue, both in terms of what service is being provided and how high quality the level of French that it's provided in has to be. This is something that the Canadian government spends an enormous amount of time and money on, just because appeasing the French Canadians is traditionally thought of as being tied to the larger political objective of fighting the existential threat that Quebec separatism is seen to embody. But in any case, the Canadian federal government tends to mostly think of public services as being things that are run by the federal government directly or heavily subsidized or regulated by the federal government in some way. This would include things like courthouses, the passport office, the post office, airports, voting places, and national parks. And when you go to the front desk at these sorts of places, they will often have one of these little fellas sitting on the desk, or some sort of similar looking sign on the wall. Sometimes they even have like little pins of this that they wear on their shirts. And it's basically just a signal that theoretically there is someone on the staff who could speak French to you if you wanted that. I stole this one from the big Vancouver Central Library a while ago. Libraries are usually run by the local government, so it's not usually the sort of place where a French speaker could make a claim of language rights. But a big downtown urban library like Vancouver's often gets a lot of funding from the feds, and providing French services is often one of the strings that comes attached to accepting that sort of cash. Bilingualism is considered a very sacred concept to Canadian officialdom, but it's difficult to represent visually, so this little sign often serves as a convenient visual shorthand for it. For example, I came across this meme posted on the official Facebook page of the Canadian Language Commissioner, who is a high-ranking Ottawa bureaucrat whose job it is to basically make sure that there are enough things offering French language services. And you can see it's like, 2 official languages, 1 rodeo. And then the sign guy is a little cowboy. This is the sort of thing that's considered the height of wit in Ottawa. All right, and talking of signs, I bought this at a souvenir store the other day. It is a replica of a road sign from the Trans-Canada Highway. If you've ever seen that one episode of South Park where they go to Canada and it's like a parody of The Wizard of Oz, and there's a joke about how there's only one road in Canada.
Follow the only road. Follow the only road. To go anywhere in Canada, you just follow the only road.
That is actually a very old joke about this country based on the existence of the Trans-Canada Highway, or what we in Western Canada call Highway 1. It's a single giant long highway that you could theoretically drive uninterrupted from coast to coast. You could start at Vancouver in the far west and drive for 60 hours straight till you got to the tip of Cape Breton Island in the far east. Building the Trans-Canada Highway was one of Canada's big post-war infrastructure initiatives, and a major accomplishment of the administration of Prime Minister John Diefenbaker, who officially opened the thing in 1962. This very iconic green sign with the big maple leaf on it is a highly recognizable symbol in Canada, not just for drivers, but for the country as a whole. You often see it made into souvenirs or parodied in various ways. It's always very charming when infrastructure becomes a symbol of national pride, eh? It feels like a very North American thing. I know that the American highway signs are similarly sentimentalized. I guess in other countries, they often have a sort of comparable cult around their trains. All right, now this is something that was very much requested in my last video. It is the Golden Rule poster. It might be less familiar to people of my generation, but Canadians under 30 will probably recognize it, since it's been a mainstay of Canadian classrooms and daycares and libraries and community centers for over 25 years now. Basically, it's a poster that lists all of the different religions of the world, and it shows you how they all basically have a teaching that is broadly similar to the Christian Golden Rule, which is, of course, treat others as you wish to be treated. It was made in the year 2000 by a Catholic guy from Ontario named Paul McKenna, who was trying to promote interfaith dialogue, but it really exploded in popularity after 9/11, which, as my older viewers will surely remember, was a time where there was a lot of anxiety about religious hatred and bigotry. A lot of Canadian schools and other places where impressionable children congregated, thus bought these posters in large numbers and hung them all over the place in order to hammer home the message that all religions are basically the same deep down. And to this day, many of these posters remain hanging in a prominent location in public places all across the country. I don't know if the nostalgia that many young Canadians feel for these things comes from any deep resonance with the message that the posters are putting forward, as opposed to them being just these very visually distinctive things that are very familiar, kind of like the notebooks. I mean, I'm sure nobody disagrees with the message, but sometimes these sorts of things have a tendency to develop a kind of sentimentality that overshadows their original purpose, or even makes you slightly indifferent to it. You know, like those celebrity read posters in the library, or the Got Milk ads. All right, and lastly, how about one of these babies? A Canadian flag backpack patch. Man oh man, does a certain sort of Canadian love to talk about these things. So, as we established earlier, Canadians and Americans are not very different at all. And often what happens when you have two countries with very similar people, the smaller country develops a theory about why their people are morally better, even if they're not as rich or powerful. In the Canadian context, this manifests in the form of a belief that a lot of Canadians hold that overseas people like Canadians more than Americans. Because, of course, we are the morally better people, you know? Nicer, kinder, more honest, and all of that. Which brings us to the patch. Supposedly, if you put one of these patches on your bag when you travel overseas, your trip will go a lot more smoothly. For example, let's say you are at the Louvre or something, and the Frenchies hear you speaking loudly in English, wondering where they're keeping the big Mona Lisa. The Frenchies might think, sacre bleu, what a horrible American. But then they spot the Canadian flag on your backpack and are like, oh ho, he is actually from Canada. And then they offer you a bite of their baguette in gratitude. In fact, some Canadians believe in this legend of the Canada flag backpack patch so strongly that they claim that even Americans do it in order to go undercover as Canadians when they travel. Which reminds me of a very funny Doonesbury comic I read a few years ago. The first guy is like, you wouldn't believe how much anti-Americanism there is in the world these days. It's getting so bad I have to pretend to be a Canadian when I travel to foreign countries. And then the other guy replies, oh really? Like where? And he's like, well, Canada mostly. Alrighty, so there you have it. 5 more distinctly Canadian objects to fill out my distinctly Canadian objects poster. Can you recognize them all? If not, why not check out the rest of the playlist? I feel pretty satisfied at this point that we've got most of the biggies on here. But if you're a Canadian and you think that there is something very iconic that is missing, be sure to let me know in the comments. And as usual, let me know what sort of cansplainer video you would like to see me make next. And be sure to subscribe if you haven't already. We are just a couple hundred away from that sweet, sweet million.